we will not need anywhere close to the 5 floors that we have. I will go in my 3 days a week, and when I'm in there, it'll say Graham Walker on the nameplate, and I will have photos of my family and my dog up. And the next day, Martha will go in, and it will say Martha on the nameplate, and she will have photos of her family and her pets.
Well, I'm going to challenge your assumption there a little bit, Rocky, that I'm not sure that much innovation arises out of lawyer-to-lawyer collision.
You hear this term like unprecedented a lot these days, and I'm not even sure it's watered down yet because it truly is. And the legal sector and your office space, like most, has been significantly impacted through COVID. And so whether that is that immediate response that we're still navigating through, or how we're going to plan for that next normal, these are questions that I'm sure a lot of our audience are going to have is how are you approaching this? So I'm going to go to the immediate response first. My first question, I'm going to direct this one to Sandra, is tell us the one main habit or process that has changed through COVID in your firm. So whether that's something like paperless and cloud, what's that one habit or process that you've changed?
Well, the one that jumps to mind right away is the paperless. So once COVID hit, everyone started to work remotely. Like the rest of the world. And it became clear that we needed to redesign all our accounting procedures so that it was paperless. So Paperlite or paperless is something that we've been trying to champion for a while now. So COVID actually forced everyone to adopt that type of workflow quite quickly. And like a lot of law firms, and prior to COVID, we operated traditionally where trust check requisitions and trust deposits, or basically anything to do with accounting, involved a lot of paper and a wet signature. So immediately we had to put in place a workflow where any instruction to accounting was created and moved electronically from one person to the next, with all the appropriate backups, with all appropriate electronic signatures. And once it got to accounting, the only time a wet signature was required was basically on the physical check. So now we've moved pretty close to paper, very, very paper-light.
But how long did that process take?
It took probably, just because of, out of necessity, 2.5 weeks.
And I'm putting on a spot again. I'm trying to always keep to the questions, but I'm really curious as to how long do you think that would have taken pre-COVID?
Oh, I was trying for a very long time. And within that 2.5 weeks, you have to remember, it wasn't just creating the process, but I had to have training sessions on Adobe, and lawyers had to learn about electronic signatures. And there was a lot of training involved, but people had to do it. It was the only way they were going to get a check sent out.
Yeah, out of necessity. Thanks for sharing that. Carrie, how about you? What's your experiences there? What habits have been broken?
So some of the things that we've heard a lot about is the need to have purposeful connections between groups within a law firm. So whether that is lawyers and their immediate staff, or it's partners and associates, or articling students, we couldn't just sort of rely on passing each other in the hallway or sort of some routine dropping by the office. People needed to say, who do I need to talk to, and schedule time with them. And, you know, to a degree, everybody's been doing that for a while, but for places that were more casual in their approach, everybody had to be more purposeful, and not just the sort of the lead or the supervisor. So too did the other side of the relationship. The articling student needed to take some initiative to connect. And those connections are so important. You know, early on it started as, how's your health and wellness? Are you okay? How are you adjusting to the change? Then it was, do you have all the tools that you need in order to do your job working from home? Now it's, you know, how can we work together? Because so much of this is going to carry on for a while. It's what new processes do we have to learn in order to maintain good supervision of our younger lawyers, maintain good follow through on getting the projects and the client work done. So people all have to put their heads towards that a little bit more.
What I love about that response and what happened was you led with a human approach. Like, let's make sure people feel safe and secure. And then, and particularly even in the context of work, your families, your extended families and that. And then we got into, like you said, sort of building up some new muscle memory about how we're going to collaborate. And now it's about scale. It's like, this is going to be our real thing. And so how do we take this and scale it? And so it's going to be an interesting journey that you and all these other law firms are on. Let's shift over to John. John, can you tell us some habits or process have changed through this experience?
Thanks, Rocky. Yeah, interesting. I'm going to pick up a bit on Sandra's point as well as Carrie's. Look, law firms by their nature are relatively conservative businesses, and the partners, a lot of us know, are really change adverse. And one of the benefits actually of COVID, you probably don't hear benefits in COVID close together very often, but it has been, the forced change literally overnight. And Sandra commented how, they had to make it happen on the accounting side, for instance. And firms have been forced in a very short period of time to innovate through digital solutions, whether it's Zoom or DocuSign or other platforms, innovate the people management side. Some things that Carrie's mentioned that it really is required in this new environment. And people have been able to do it at an accelerated way, and the pace of change has just been remarkable. So in sum, I would say, in terms of the habit or process that has changed, I'd say we found ways to force change, to adapt quickly. And I would say, there's not going to be a new normal. There's going to be a new dynamic, and the pace of change will continue to accelerate as we move forward.
Right, and maybe new dynamic, also new paradigm. That whole paradigm of work was broken anyway, and it sounds like as well the mindset was a big thing. Just getting people around, this is real. That these things were going to come at some point, and what COVID did was basically, as you said, accelerate it. Graham, what are your thoughts?
Sure. Thanks, Rocky. Much of it's already been said by John, Carrie, and Sandra, but I would want to pick up on 2 points, one that Sandra made, one that Carrie made. So Sandra's point is we were quite, at BLG, quite technologically advanced, I would have to say, but like almost every law firm I know, still extremely paper heavy, particularly on the professional side of thing. Our business services side of our house was quite paper light already, which was useful. We still went through the same growings as Sandra did in terms of getting everything on the accounting side of the house electronic, but that took us a couple of weeks as well. But our professionals, by and large, have almost all become paperless. And I'm a dinosaur, and I am completely paperless now, which I thought would either never happen or take me years. So what we've actually done, and this is, I'm telling you the truth, we have actually gone on our 5 professional floors at Waterfront Center, and we have removed almost every printer from the floor. Even though we don't have very many people on the floors, we've gone from 20 printers per floor to 4, and we've gotten rid of them. So we've already told our professionals, when you're coming back, you're not printing. And that's going to be part of our new normal. Just very briefly to Carrie's point, one of the things that has been really interesting and very challenging is engaging with our summer students. We have 10 students we brought in June. And of course, for them in second-year university, it's been extremely difficult to keep them engaged. They don't even meet the lawyers that they're working with face to face. So we've put into place a number of programs and very small face to face gatherings just to help them socialize. But it's been a real challenge.
Oh, I can only imagine. So I wouldn't say you're a dinosaur, but in terms on that sort of realm of dinosaurs and artifacts and that, it's so interesting as you're saying that. I think of the printer in a law office as being an artifact, in that you've gone from 20 to 4 or 5, like you said. That's actually very symbolic in a cultural term, in a cultural sense. When they walk in, and that call it legacy card, artifact, whatever it is, it sends a really strong signal to what this next normal is going to be. Yeah. So Mike, you're in the unlucky position to be last to answer this question. What's your thoughts on what you've experienced in your firms?
We've had the platforms to do this for a very long time. A very long time, 4 or 5 years. And so when I work on a file with somebody in Chicago and somebody in Toronto and somebody in Vancouver and somebody in Hong Kong, we have to use essentially COVID-19 work processes. They were very unevenly used across the firm, and lots of people, if they possibly could, would revert to the old approaches whenever they could. And they would use the collaboration tools we have across offices and across the country only under pressure. Now it's the norm. We we have, we've got all the electronic platforms in full use across the firm now, which before were very spotty. We still have the lawyers dividing into those who are waiting for it to be over and get back to normal, and those who either know that it's not going to get back to normal or don't want it to. And we'll have a very interesting time. And people are going to, picking up on what Graham said, we will have people coming back to our office when we fully reopen at some point. And they'll discover that the printer population has been decimated. And they're going to have nothing to say about it because they won't even mind, because for the last 6 months, they will not have used a printer. So that's going to be a change that sticks, I think. And fascinated by what Sandra said about accounting processes. Accounting was our least paper, our most paper reliant function. So much waiting, so much paper. And we tried, I'm in the real estate group. We always wanted to run our business into accounting electronically. And accounting said, no. If you do that, we just have to print it. And I said, well, why? And they said, we have to put it in the file. And I said, well, I'm not keeping a file. Why are you keeping a file? So in 2 weeks, those processes all went out the window and were replaced by paperless processes. And they'll never go back.
Oh, man. You keep hearing stories upon stories of pace, of organizations that transcend all sectors. It's been an awakening. So you said actually a lot of things, Mike, that pivot to weave right into our first poll question. You said that some of your lawyers are waiting for it to go back to normal. Some things like this, we're going to eventually get back to work. So Amanda, can you fire up the first poll question onto the screen? So this is for our audience, who we presume are going to be a lot of people who are lawyers and working in the field. Our question we'd like to ask you, this is fully anonymous, is how many days per week do you want to work from home in this next normal or in the future? So let's give about 30 seconds for our attendees to complete this survey, and we'll get the results up in about 30 seconds.
Well, people are filling that in, Rocky. I can see a lot of real estate coming free by not holding paper downtown.
I would have to agree with that. Okay, so I'll as well. So Amanda, I know you're in the background checking that out. I can't see the participation. So how about I just give you a cue in about, say, 20 seconds? Oh, wow, it's up already. Interesting. So it sounds like we closed a poll because the vast majority of you responded. And here are our results. In the future, of those that are on this webinar today, the 44% are saying they would like to work from home 1 to 2 days a week, and 3 to 4 days a week for 37. So we've got the vast majority saying they'd like to work from home somewhere between 1 to 4 days. So that's a pretty telling stat there. So I'm just going to close this off my screen if you want to close it off yours. Let's get into the next question then. So in a post-COVID world, with many wanting to keep this work from home, which we just saw in this poll, they wanted this option. So what purpose does the physical office even fulfill? And what could it look like? Sort of what can or can't change? And so let's start off with Graham with this question. What do you think the future holds for the purpose of that physical office?
Okay, thanks, Rocky. So for those that have been into BLG's offices, we lease 7 floors in the Waterfront Center. One of those we have fully sublet. So we have 5 professional floors in our boardroom floor. We have 130 lawyers on those 5 floors and paralegals, and of course our assistants. We have very large single occupancy offices due to the age of our facilities, and our staff are all open concept. As I mentioned, we're digitally enhanced. We were ready to go for COVID, fortunately, and remote work has been quite good for all of us, leaving aside the mental wellness issues that everyone has to deal with. We've taken a survey of our folks, and they're very similar to what we just saw on the poll that was presented on the screen. I mean, the vast majority of our people want to get back in the office, but don't intend to get back on a full-time basis. Very few of our professionals want to be back 5 or 6 days a week. So we've had some preliminary discussions, and we anticipate that we will not need anywhere close to the 5 floors that we have. I would say probably our average office space is about 250 feet per professional, so it's very large, and we can probably get down to about 100 to 125 square foot per office, and that still gives everyone an office. I expect we'll be down to 3 floors from 5 floors, so we'll over double our occupancy. Much of that per floor, much of that's going to be open, collaborative space and things like that. I think that we will not have our own individual offices. We are anticipating fully digital offices. So while there'll be private space, we'll have storage facilities for our professionals. I will go in my 3 days a week, and when I'm in there, it'll say Graham Walker on the nameplate, and I will have photos of my family and my dog up. And the next day, Martha will go in, and it will say Martha on the nameplate, and she will have photos of her family and her pets. And she will gather her materials, and they'll be in her office. And then for people that are coming in just very periodically, we'll have hoteling options available for them. In shared spaces. So I think I anticipate that's what the future of our offices are going to look like. So quite a significant change.
Oh my God, I would go profound. The idea that you're going to reduce it by 50%. And a key thing here, like I call space bait. I'm not in the legal space. I'm a futurist. I'm the future work guy. But I can say that in my experiences in professional services, and particularly in a partner model, this idea of having a corner office or a big private office, this was part of that. I've made it. And now what I'm hearing from you is that we may not even have private office going forward. Like that's a profound shift in which an industry that had anchored on this idea that I've made it.
Yeah, I think that's right, Rocky. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of our lawyers, and I had done this obviously well in advance of COVID. And at BLG, in any event, people are fond of their own space, but people are quite, especially with COVID, and with the work from home reality, and for instance, some of just the common sense attributes working from home in terms of finances and things like that. What we're hearing now is when I go into the office, and if I'm going to be in there for 2 or 3 days, if I'm doing a hearing or having a closing or something, I do need my own private space. I want it, but I don't really care where it is. As long as it's near the group that I'm working most closely with, I can be in an office anywhere on that floor. Doesn't matter to me.
Mike, what are your thoughts on what you heard, or which is your general thesis on the future of the office space?
Well, see, we went kind of where Graham was talking about 3 years ago, and some of our people went happily and some went kicking and screaming. But our office now is in Vancouver, and we have a similar setup in Markham, but not our other offices. Half of the lawyers are in relatively small interior offices, interior but glass, 10 by 10, so 100 square feet per. The other half of the lawyers are in the open, in workstations identical to everybody else's. And interestingly enough, when we polled people on were they ready, this was in June, are you ready to come back to the office? 3 times as many people said they were ready to come back to the office among the office inhabitants of the lawyers, as opposed to the working in the open lawyers. And so 2 ways to read that. One is that the people working in the open were more scared about virus. The other is that people in the office want to get back to normal, please. And I tend toward the latter because everybody's concerned about the virus, but the office inhabitants, the traditional law firm partner has kind of had huge sway over our space decisions, and a lot of the our business side people will probably be the first to say that one of the big problems managing a law firm is law firm partners. Who have a way of thinking, and it must be this way, and it's always been like this. And the accounting firms and other professional service firms, they're way ahead of us on this. And so I think we're all going to be moving into a completely different approach to the office. We went in 2017 from 65,000 or 67,000 square feet to 49,000. We could easily drop another 15 or 20% tomorrow. Now, everybody's in leases. Nothing's going to happen right away, but this is where things are going.
Well, first of all, thank you for that candid sort of insight into that partner mentality. When you went from 67 to 49, was that with a similar amount of headcount?
Yes.
It was. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Excellent. So, Carrie, what are your thoughts?
Well, one of the best things about, and I know, like you were saying early, best things about working from home because of COVID, but one of the best things was that because almost everybody moved to working from home, people saw, and law firm leaders saw, that it was possible and that productivity could be maintained. And I think, 10 years ago, when young women who were having kids would return to work and say, I'd really like to work one day from home, and the answer was no, because a partner couldn't possibly conceive of that. Now we know that this can happen. And so I can see that more people will be able to have this working from home option going forward. Almost everybody moved to working from home. People saw, and law firm leaders saw, that it was possible and that productivity could be maintained. And I think, 10 years ago, when young women who were having kids would return to work and say, I'd really like to work one day from home, and the answer was no, because a partner couldn't possibly conceive of that. Now we know that this can happen. And so I can see that more people will be able to have this working from home option going forward. But in terms of what that physical space needs to be for, again, working from home doesn't work for everyone. If you think about the square footage of homes or condos in Vancouver, they're very small. And if you now have multiple people working from home in that space, it may not be particularly conducive to focus and productivity. And again, people who've got kids, parents, who've been trying to work from home with the kids, they're saying, I don't have my focus space. I need to get back to that physical space in the office. Mm-hmm. So people's individual circumstances, or whether it's their home, and if they have a home office, or their responsibilities and who else is in the house. It could be just a spouse, but the two of you do not want to be in the same spot that much all the time. I think that the physical office will always give people that focus space where they're connected to the people who are doing that same work, and we're always going to need that option.
Carrie, I can absolutely validate what you just said. As someone for almost a decade been coaching companies to go remote, what we learned was that it was never about this idea, I want to work in my cowboy jammies. This was all about choice. And so people have choice now, and that's what they've wanted in all aspects of our life in a hyper-personalized world. If I want to go see my daughter's concert at school, I want to be able to do that. If I want to walk my son to school, if I want to work at home for one day because I'm going to get in the flow, or I want to go to the office for the social interaction. It was never about, I want to work from home, but give me choice, because everyone is different. So what you said was really impactful. And the other thing too, I'm sure a lot of people on this webinar are thinking is, what was the impact? And maybe, if we throw it out, what you've seen on outcomes you talked about, because it can be done, and even the client experience. Have you started to gather insights from other sources to say that, yes, we can prove that outcomes and experience of our clients is at least as good or better in this new world?
Yeah, that's a good thing for law firms to be thinking about in terms of what is their client experience, because I know that just the anecdotal feedback has been that many clients are delighted not to have to drive into downtown Vancouver or downtown Victoria or wherever they might be, find parking, figure it out, a video option, which many firms have had for a long time, but others, this was new for them to be able to do that. And they're getting positive feedback from the majority of the clients. Obviously, depending on the work you do, if you're doing an estate practice where you've got a lot of senior people, that's not necessarily what they want. But so far, people are saying it's a good thing.
Yeah, hearing the same. John, over to you.
Sure. Picking up a couple of themes there. I think, one of the most important factors to the success of an organization is highly engaged people. And highly engaged people are happier, they're more positive, they provide better client service in a law firm environment for sure. And it's really hard to do that remotely. It's not impossible, but it's difficult to do. So I think one of the key purposes of the physical office is going to be, creating that environment where people can be engaged and highly engaged. The physical interaction for sure, the collaboration. There's a comment earlier about students coming into the workforce and not being physically in the office, and how difficult it is from a mentoring perspective. So if that's the purpose of the office, I think you're going to see a bit of a redesign to ensure that there's spaces for that engagement, that collaboration. At the same time, a bit with Mike on the office side of it, as opposed to Graham, because I think people do want the physical privacy space of the office where they're doing the heavy lifting on working, and I'm sensing in terms of talking to our people that they really like their environment at the office to be like their home in the sense it's their space. We're certainly going to have to be innovative to see whether we can shrink spaces because people are working remotely. But I think it's going to be difficult. And I think you might see an environment where people even coming in 2 days a week, they want their space, they want their photos, but not just their photos that get up for that day. They want their clothes in the office because they bike in. They want their space to be their space. And I think there's going to be some pressure on additional offices and more space, even though people are working remotely.
So John, I just want to make sure I heard something correctly. Are you suggesting that the generation, age, however you want to split that you believe that engagement in the virtual world is not possible regardless of a demographic?
I think it's very difficult. Is it impossible? Perhaps not with the growing demographic, but even our young people, they don't enjoy it. And that's what we're hearing from our new students coming in. Yeah, it's okay, but it's not great. And so I think even with the new generation, people really want to be physically part of something.
Yeah. Well, for what it's worth, for someone deeply entrenched in the tech space, it's actually no different there. When we always look at them as being so modern, they're actually echoing the same things you just said. So very fascinating. It transcends sectors. And Sandra, sorry to leave you waiting for so long. What are your thoughts on this?
On the physical space, well, work from home is here to stay for sure. I can't believe how universally successful it's been. I'm shocked, surprised. Everyone has adjusted beautifully. But in terms of physical space, I think we're always going to need. We are a litigation firm, so unless the courts go to an entire electronic system, we will always still need to print. Like, that's the truth of the matter. You still need things to be printed, booklets to be made. So that part will never change. And the other thing which was really surprising to me is, although we encouraged clients, our lawyers, to meet with their clients online through video chat or whatever, there were so many that wanted to come in and meet their lawyer before they retain them. And so we will always have to have those client meeting spaces. The clients just wanted to they wanted to know that they meshed with their lawyer, they got a good vibe, they got a good feeling. And sometimes you just can't get that on a screen. So they even though we discouraged it, they wanted to come in, they wanted to see someone face to face, and they wanted to know that they could have that trust and build that relationship. So we will always have meeting space for that purpose.
I think, Sandra, that echoes what Carrie was saying around the client experience and choice, is that we wouldn't ever bucket all of our clients under one umbrella to say that you all want to go remote. Well, to get a great experience, we're going to have to tailor it to their particular needs. And so that point is very well taken. Let's go a little bit more tactical with this next question. So we'd like to know, how do you see your team developing new relationships and innovation with less water-cooled chat, particularly throughout the day, because so many people aren't even in this office? So let's get a little more tactical here. How are you keeping those relationships and innovation when that serendipitous collisions are happening less frequently? Mike, let's kick it off with you.
Well, I'm going to challenge your assumption there a little bit, Rocky, that I'm not sure that much innovation arises out of lawyer-to-lawyer collision. In fact, a lot of what we do in our offices is more in the line of control than innovation and collaboration. So we've used offices as a way for the senior lawyers to impose work rules and work habits on people coming in. Say, oh, I'll show you how this is done, and after about 6 years, you'll be thoroughly indoctrinated and you'll believe it. I think we haven't valued as a profession. We suffer from arrogance, and we haven't valued enough the value, the worthiness of cross collaboration across professions, cross fertilization, people on the outside. So to collaborate with those people, we need to be exposing ourselves to them at all times. We need to be talking to them. We need to be at events with them. We need to be communicating with them. So that said, we are going to have to if I think about my little group, if we're going to be partly out of the office and partly in the office, we're going to want those people to be in the office sometimes all at the same time. This will be tough during COVID, but post-COVID, I think we'll get back to the point where, my little real estate group, on say Tuesdays and Thursdays of each week, we'll try and all be in the office so that we can work with each other that way. But I think we're going to have to program other ways of people socializing as well. And there are tech firms that have people working remotely 51 weeks of the year, and in week 52 they all get together, and you make very powerful relationships that way. And people who are in national firms and international firms will know this, that we form relationships in a weekend that fuel our work with other people for years. So it doesn't take every day, and innovation arises in places where we may not really realize it.
Oh, Mike, I love it. And then you banged on, I think, with the cross-functional collaboration, and then you even went even further, the ecosystem collaboration, getting outside of your own four walls. So very, very forward thinking. John, do you agree with that? Do you have other views on the water cool chat and the value?
Yeah, I certainly agree with the cross collaboration for sure, whether that's cross practice teams or different industries and professions for sure. So 100% with that. And again, I think it's difficult to do in a remote world. In terms of the water cooler, sort of come back to my point about engagement again. We really need to have a highly engaged workforce, and so we need to have new ways to try to do that with people. Key, of course, is regular, deliberate sort of communication, an environment of inviting feedback. Again, some of us are managing partners. Undoubtedly, when we're all in the office, people pop into my office all the time, partners, to complain about something, have constructive feedback in terms of things. I'm not hearing much right now, and it's a challenge for people, I think. And so whether it's the managing partner or the business service lead or an assistance manager, I think the individuals are having a hard time providing feedback, engaging with their people, and so you need to create platforms, and it can't just be Zoom. You got to have those social platforms, and maybe it's specific sessions. And I've started to do smaller group sessions. I'm sure we all do sort of broad town halls we have 200 people, and I've done broad town halls for updates, but I've started to do smaller group sessions, like small groups of partners, small groups of associates, our corporate services team the other day. And we're investing in leadership training for all of our leads about how to do those sorts of things in a remote environment, because it's going to be critical for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, continuous feedback is super important in this remote world. There's a great tool. I won't promote another company on the webinar, but offline, if anyone listening wants to know some great feedback tool that's automated, let me know, because I've got some great tools out there. Graham, can I shift over to you and give us some of your feedback on this topic?
Yeah, thanks, Rocky. I'll be quite brief on this point. So one interesting outcome of COVID, at least for us, a national firm with bases across the country, has been an increase in practice group collaboration and some really good innovation, which we weren't seeing before because we didn't have the sort of forced meetings of senior professionals from each practice group, which we now have every week or bi-weekly at a minimum. We had never really sort of instituted those as formally as we have during COVID. So that's been a very positive experience and something that we're obviously going to have to maintain post-COVID. I agree completely with John, and just in terms of the importance of face-to-face meetings. And so once we're back in the office, 50 to 75% of us post-COVID, it's really important, especially from a Vancouver region perspective, which is my main thrust, is to have those group of 10 in a board over lunch, engaging. Obviously, I mentioned students before, very important for summer students and articled students, I think, to be in the office full time. From an engagement perspective. And as a managing partner, what I really don't get very often now, which is really unfortunate from my perspective, is those partners just randomly, or lawyers walking randomly into the office just to raise issues that have or discuss points. That's something I look forward to getting back to.
Yeah, through a lot of this, and there's so many competing thoughts, because none of us actually know what's going to play out. But what I hear so often is this fundamental DNA of people is like we're social by nature, and again, that's where I keep going back to choice for other reasons of cost of living, or if it is because I want to work in the flow. There's a use case for working from home, but to deny this idea that we're social beings is a truly fascinating debate to have. No matter what your business is.
Yeah, no, that's right. Like one thing I was thinking of just yesterday, as a matter of fact, was, post-COVID, one of the nice things about working from home, working remotely, is it's going to allow some of our younger people who simply can't afford to live anywhere in the Lower Mainland to live in more far-reaching areas. Squamish, take for example, but knowing that they need to come into the office twice a week. Or maybe even more, but at least twice a week for practice group meetings. But they're going to be able to do that and afford a nicer place. So I think we'll see. I think we'll see that being a lasting benefit of this.
Yeah, I would agree. Carrie, over to you. You have the hammer. What did they miss, and what are your thoughts on the water cooler and the value of that?
In my previous life, I had spent a lot of time coaching new lawyers and articling students about how to be successful. And a lot of that has to do with building the relationships with other people in the firm, the senior associates or the partners handling work. And we would talk about things like check other people's calendars during the day, figure out what other people's work hours were. And if they start at 6 and you want to work with them, you show up at 6, and doing those sorts of things. So all of that has to get readjusted if we think about more people working from home. But it means that every single one of those contacts becomes that much more important and that much more valuable. So if your workday is Tuesday and Thursday, for example, in the office with the rest of the real estate team, make sure that you're like on that day and you are making the most out of every connection that is there. I think that having space created for informal chats, like we've talked about practice groups getting together or meeting with certain team things to talk about the business and the client work. I think it's also good to say, hey, this is just coffee, 10 o'clock once a week or once every 2 weeks for half an hour, get a small group together and create that informality that you might have if you just crossed paths in the office. And that's a way to try and foster those relationships.
Oh, I love that. And you said a point that echoes Mike's. You said to make the most of that time. And so, Mike, by the way, I've got a very good friend who's a senior product manager at one of those companies you're talking about, fully distributed, 1,000 employees across the world. They do that annual get together. And he'll tell you, we maximize that week together and get so much building and sharing of that town hall, what the vision is for the company, making friends and all these things. And that's even just less than a week a year. And you carry point, if it's others who it's like, you're coming to the office one day a week, make the most of that as well. And it doesn't always have to be so structured. So it's really, whatever extreme you're on, making the most of your time is what I'm hearing. Okay, so let's get into this final section of our panel interaction and rapid fire. So I call this rapid fire. So I'm going to ask the panelists each the same question, and they're going to get 20 seconds at most to answer, share their thoughts. So we're going to start with Carrie on this one. And the question for all of you is, what about the typical law firm downtown will never change, and why? 20 seconds, Carrie, you're on the hot seat.
You are always going to need somebody who can manage change and encourage it, because there's always going to be change, more so now than ever before, and you're still going to encounter resistance. So you're going to have somebody who needs to know how to manage that going forward.
Awesome. Okay, Mike?
I would say lawyers, but that's trite. Actually, it's people but lawyers like we know them now, I don't think so. I think it's people with a specialized body of knowledge and a mandate to apply it to solve problems and come up with creative solutions. And that is not the legal profession as we know it necessarily. We are going to be knowledge workers more than we are lawyers in the more traditional sense.
Wow. And Graham, what are your thoughts?
Space. So boardroom space for client meetings, because some of those are just critical, has been mentioned before, and also space for, I'm a litigator, so, trial preparation, that has to happen with a team of 2 or 3 or 4 lawyers. You need to get together in boardrooms several weeks before the trial and prep. That will never change.
That'll never change. Okay, Sandra, what about the typical law firm downtown will never change?
You're still always going to need offices and space for people who feel that their law firm is their social connection. They're always going to have a place for them to work at.
Okay, thank you. John?
And following up on Sandra's point, private offices within that same environment. I really think there's, that's not going to change. People are going to want their own space, and we may have more private offices going forward.
Okay, fascinating. Our next and final rapid fire question, and John, I'm going to actually have you answer this one first. It's going to be, what have you done to your space to make people feel safe to return? And what needs to be in place to let employees and clients know that you actually mean what you say? So John, let's start with you.
Yeah, so we've done probably all the same things as other people, regular cleaning, all of the tools like sanitizers, masks, etc., the signage. But the critical piece to all of that really is a detailed health and safety plan, one that's rolled out, one that's easy to understand, one that's branded the way the firm does business, and then it's just published and published broadly both to clients and people so they know that we take it seriously.
Okay, Sandra, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, following up on what John just said, the return to work safety plan is always really important, but I believe that your workplace also has to be staged so that people know what you mean, what you say. So it has to feel safe. They have to walk in. I sort of call it the sort of like the Four Seasons effect, where you walk in and when you walk in that lobby, you are going to be taken care of. And so you have to sort of translate that into your office, where people have to walk in and they have to know you mean business. So we're used to having a lot of choice in our life, but when it comes to COVID, there has to be no choice. People have to know that when they walk in, they can only stand at a certain place. They must, wash their hands. They have to walk this way and they have to turn left. They can't turn right. So when people see these cues around them, they know that this place takes it seriously. And it can't be, and this falls into the staging thing, but you can't just write on an 8.5 by 11 and stick it up on a door and say max capacity 5 or whatever. There has to be some forethought. There have to be real signs. There has to be real indications of what is and is not allowed. And once they see all those cues, people are going to say, whoa, this is like serious. I'm safe and my coworkers are safe.
Right. It's kind of like having your core values on a wall and thinking people are going to live them. That's just pure vanity, right? Graham, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks. So we have a published health and safety plan, and that's being implemented. We currently have 20% of people back in the office maximum. We monitor that health and safety plan and we enforce it. So if we hear of people, and we do, who are not complying with that plan, it gets to me and I have a face-to-face discussion with them, and it gets rectified. That's it, Rocky. I mean, wow. we take it very seriously.
Yeah, no kidding. Carrie?
Similar to, and maybe picking up on especially what Graham and Sandra just said, I think you have to model the behavior you expect. You have the plan, you put up the signs, but the individual managing partner or the team leads, they have to model the behavior that you're expecting of others. It means standing on the little place that tells you where to stand. It means not skipping the queue. If you're signing up to who gets to be in the office, you follow the protocols. I think some of the frustrations I've heard from lawyers has been they can't get their lawyers to comply with what they've said. So more of what Graham's saying, and so you have to deal with it. But we all have to be modeling what we expect, especially if we make a mistake and we screw up and we forgot to sanitize our hands before going into the kitchen. Just acknowledge it, do better next time.
Yeah, no, for sure. And easier said than done, right? Mike, round us out. What are you guys doing to make your space feel safe and practicing what you preach?
Well, it's interesting that the notions of modeling and enforcement. And if we don't do those things, we slip to the lowest common denominator. You see this in all kinds of spaces right now around the pandemic. It's particularly south of the 49th parallel. Lack of leadership, lack of modeling, voluntary approaches. So we have to protect against sliding to that lowest common denominator, or people will not feel safe. And you can't expect people to go challenge somebody else on their own. particularly if that somebody else is a partner. We found a lot of our non-lawyers actually didn't tell the whole truth when they were asked were they willing to come back to the office.
Oh.
And so we did a survey that wasn't anonymous because we wanted to actually know who was doing what. And we had to conclude that the non-lawyers they had some trepidation about coming back and had trepidation about telling people about that. So we've had to underline for people, we're aiming for 25% right now. We had to underline for people, this is truly voluntary. We actually mean it. And if you say you're not comfortable being back in this environment at this time, then we will continue to support you. And that raises some eyebrows among the partners because they're not used to that.
I bet. You also said that calling people out. I don't know if there's the exact term you use, but I sort of live by this. I believe that generally people are good. And I have that glass half full view, but I do know that it's uncomfortable for people. And they don't know, like, how are you feeling? I saw this incredible initiative. I don't know what firm it was or what company it was, but they came up with a really simple red, yellow, and green wristband. Did you see these? And so if you wore a red wristband, it meant that I'm really cautious. And can you please always maintain your 6 foot away from me? If it was yellow, it's like, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. We can do an elbow tap or whatever. And if you got a green one, you can go ahead and hug me. But it was this way for us to signal how we personally felt because you weren't going to probably call people that you didn't know. People were afraid to say, hey, can you, stick away? And so I think some things like that, along with all you're saying to do, can really help to socialize with the people and make it a really human experience as we go back to the office. So this has been incredible so far. I've learned a ton. I hope the audience has. We're going to go to Q&A time. So Catherine, did you want to read questions or shall I?
Sure, I don't mind reading a couple of the questions here, Rocky.
Okay.
So the first one we have, the question is, large U.S. law firms have been successfully shrinking their footprints for over 10 years, and they've used an example of a firm with over 1,000 lawyers that has shrunk all of their offices nationally, most by 75% or more. We seem to be lagging in Canada. What's our hesitation?
Okay, so that's just open to anybody. Are we lagging, and if so, why?
Well, I can jump in. I'm by no means expert on this, but I think it's been mentioned before. The lawyers are extremely change resistant. I think Mike mentioned that before. And so, we've had our old ways of doing business, and, to get people's mindsets, anything out of the large corner office with the comfy leather chair is very, very challenging. You look at the other professional service firms, like all the main 4 accounting firms, they've been doing that for a long, long time. So we're slow to change, but firms like Mike's and the McCarthy's office in Vancouver, we're starting to see it here. It's coming. It's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. But did you notice, was there actually a difference between U.S. and Canadian mindset, not just the partner mindset?
I don't have any American partners, so I can't speak. All I can think of is that the larger firms just decided earlier than we did here in Canada, at least the larger firms in the U.S., that the big 4 accounting firm model was the effective, efficient way to go. And they're not wrong. It's just lawyers have always had a different way of doing business.
Right. Anyone else have comments on that?
Note, in my view, I think the U.S. experience is because they've moved to a corporate model much quicker than Canada did in the law firm environment. And by corporate model, I mean like the large Canadian accounting firms, very corporate mindset. And so decisions and dictations come from on high, where in Canada, I think most law firms still try to embrace a partnership culture where every partner has a voice and a say. And as a result of that, I think, back to the point, resistant to change partners, more partnership-like model, therefore slower to change over time.
John, I think there's a whole webinar just generally in professional services about the partner model and the future of that. That's a whole discussion in itself. Any other feedback on that question before we get to the next one? Okay, Catherine, what else do we have?
All right, the next question. Does your firm have an intranet? If you don't, is it on the discussion table to adopt to the new normal? More specifically, and a little off topic, do you find an intranet being helpful in driving business development initiatives or other firm-wide practice group-wide initiatives?
Okay.
I'll speak to that a little bit, Rocky. Intranet can mean a lot of things. We'd like to have one single unified platform inside the firm, but in fact we have two or three. And some of them work really well and some of them not so well, but we found that the people who do better in this environment are the people who know how to use those platforms or are willing to learn. There's an immense, there's a wave of knowledge sharing going on right now among our people, bringing everyone's use of those platforms up to the same level. So I think it's critical, and it's the investment is significant. The operating costs are significant, but I don't actually think you can work in this environment with a firm of any size without one.
Right. So there's utility is what I'm hearing, Catherine, in the intranet from Mike's view. Any other opinion on that?
Yeah, I can be really brief. We have one. We've had one for years. It's fantastic. I have it up on my second screen all day, every day. It's great.
There you go. So whoever asked that question, there's your endorsement from two leading firms in the city that yes, get an intranet. And Catherine, another question. We got a couple minutes before we wrap up here.
All right. Have any firms decided to go completely virtual? And if yes, did you have a checklist or what resources did you use?
If anybody gives you a checklist for that, they're not telling you the truth. There are virtual law firms. I haven't spoken to them myself, but my wife's a journalist and she spent a couple of days talking to a virtual law firms not too long ago. And it is entirely possible to do it. I've been 4 months. I've been in the office 4 times, so I'm actually in a virtual law firm at the moment. But no, there's no checklist. We're going to have to figure it out as we go along.
Progress over perfection. Go ahead, Carrie. Were you about to go off mute?
Yeah, I know that there are some smaller size firms, both out of Vancouver and Victoria, who have had a virtual way of working forever. Like they've never seen a client in person. There is no actual physical office. They tend to be smaller, like 2 or 3 lawyers and a couple of support staff and a contract bookkeeper. I haven't seen a large virtual law firm. I'm thinking of it as a virtual law firm as opposed to law firms where people are working virtually, which is what many firms are doing now, right? They do exist. I think they would agree that there was no checklist. It's just figure it out because it's still very new and it's trial and error, and you have to be prepared to take some risks. So good on you if you're going to try it.
Yeah, good distinction. A virtual law firm versus a law firm going virtual. There is a distinction there. So we're butting up against the hour here. I see everyone's still on. No one's left this webinar. So clearly there was high value. I want to thank everyone for their insights, but I'm going to actually pass it over to Dan Borum, who is the CEO of Aura. And Dan, if you want to give some final words.
Yeah, I just wanted to, on the behalf of the team at Aura, thank everyone on the panel here for their insights and their valuable time. And obviously you, Rocky, as moderator. And if anyone in the attendees is interested in finding more about how Aura is helping law firms build a business case for the things we're talking about today in the new way of working and using space more efficiently, please reach out. We're offering complimentary consultations for that. But wanted to thank everyone again very much for joining today.
All right, a virtual applause. Should we give all ourselves here? Yeah, thanks again. Good wave there. And yeah, I'll just turn it over to Catherine if there's anything else. And if not, thank you everyone for joining and sticking on. Hope you got some good value from this conversation.
Thank you very much, Rocky. And thank you again to all of our panelists. We appreciate your time today. And that concludes our session for today. Thank you for joining.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon.